Team 7 is really strong, with Naruto and Kakashi both going on to hold the title of Hokage and Sasuke standing shoulder to shoulder in power with Hokage Naruto. It's safe to say that at least 3 of the 4 reach insane heights. However, the 4th member of Team 7, Sakura Haruno, also reaches similarly insane heights, but it seems to me like she doesn't necessarily get the respect she deserves in the power scaling department. So, in this video, what I'll be doing is examining the feats, going over where exactly Sakura should scale, and delivering you a definitive answer on just how strong she really is. In other words, today we'll be exploring and breaking down why Sakura is underrated. Before we get started on the scaling, I think it's worth going over some stipulations and video structure points. First, I'd like to make this clear, this is not a Sakura character analysis. This will be me going over her power scaling throughout the series. To be totally upfront, I do not like Sakura as a character at all until maybe the end of the series, and even then, not that much. It's really not until we get into Boruto that she's a net positive for me in terms of likability, but again, that's not what we'll be covering. I just wanted to get that out of the way. What we will be doing though is breaking this down into 5 parts based on her different forms. Part 1, Shippuden, War Arc, Young Adult, and then Boruto Era Sakura. Also, it's worth noting that I'll be pulling only from canon material, so the manga, the canon novels, and the Boruto anime are all in play here. If anyone is curious about why those pieces of material are canon and how they fall in the canon hierarchy, I have an entire video going over the entirety of the Naruto canon and why these pieces of media are in fact canon. So if you'd like to go watch that now and then come back, or just click it afterwards and watch it then for confirmation, feel free to go to the link in the description. But without any further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into the scaling. I'm doing part 1 Sakura as one whole section because, to be frank, she's buns throughout all of part 1. She doesn't really get any impressive scaling until we get to part 2, which makes sense because that's when she actually gets some decent one-on-one training. But I would still like to go over the feats that she does have to give a definitive placement for where she's at as a combatant in part 1. One impressive thing I think that people continue to overlook all too often with Sakura is her intellect. Not only is she stated to have an impressive range of knowledge in the academy, Kakashi also implies that she's the sharpest of Konoha's rookies. This likely doesn't apply to Shikamaru, as it's unlikely that Kakashi would know about his brilliance at the time if Kurenai didn't know until much later, but this at least puts her raw intellect above the likes of Sasuke. This may just be in terms of overall knowledge and maybe ability to pick up on things quickly, and not necessarily strategic abilities, but she's at a minimum an overall smarter character than Sasuke and Naruto at the time of the Land of Waves arc. This sharpness is put on full display a few times in part 1, with the best examples, at least early on, being her in-depth understanding and explanation of chakra, as well as her ability to pick up on the tree climbing exercise faster than the other 2 Genin team members of Team 7. These were great demonstrations of her elite talent for chakra control, as well as her deep understanding of the functionality and makeup of chakra itself. The only other feat in regards to her intellect from part 1 that I think is worth noting is that she did pass the Chunin exam's written test without cheating, something that not even Sasuke could pull off. What we get from all of this is that Sakura is actually really impressive in terms of her general knowledge, which could serve as a good tool in battle if her actual combat scaling wasn't so bad. And this is precisely the big problem with part 1 Sakura. She's so fodder in terms of actual combat abilities that her intellect means next to nothing in an actual battle. This is on full display against the Sound Shinobi in the Forest of Death. While Naruto and Sasuke are out recovering from their battle against Orochimaru, Sakura sets a trap just in case someone tries to come and take them down. This involves setting a booby trap feint, making it look like there's a trap in the middle of the clearing, drawing the opponent to it only for there to be a second layer in place, a giant log that swings down from above in an attempt to take down the Sound Shinobi, and that's it. This strategy is dog water, but I'm not gonna lie, the 2-step plan was countered by fodder. This is about 5 steps and 3 abilities short of Naruto's Land of Waves strategy, and Naruto isn't even noted for his intellect, although he does have good battle IQs throughout the series. But I think the reason it was pure cheeks as a strategy is because she literally has nothing to work with in terms of her combat arsenal, whereas Naruto at least can combine multiple shadow clones with 2 levels of transformation. What this awful strategy led to is Sakura getting caught by the Sound Shinobi Kin, grabbed by her hair and held in place. But then she pulls out a kunai, and instead of stabbing Kin, she decides to just cut her hair. What's worse is that this second terrible strategy is followed up by another god-awful strategy of just using substitution jutsu twice against the sound shinobi and then pretending to use it a third time, creating an opening against Zaku, which allowed for her to stab him in the hand, and then she bites him instead of going for another strike. So yeah, even though she's stated and shown to have a really good intellect, she isn't capable of utilizing it effectively in battle scenarios because her combat abilities suck. But thankfully, she does go on to train in the time skip and gets a lot stronger. This version of Sakura, though, cannot be anywhere above Genin level in my opinion, but that's fine because, well, she's a Genin. However, even in the Genin tier, I'd say she's towards the bottom of the barrel, with most of the people from the Konoha 12 being above her. So with that out of the way, let's move on to something far more interesting. Shippuden Sakura. I hope that you guys enjoyed that transition and the opportunity to cleanse your mental palates from that garbage, because this is going to be a lot more fun. Shippuden Sakura is actually really impressive in terms of her scaling. Not only does she retain and likely improve on her raw intellect, her power increases by probably orders of magnitude. She goes from barely being able to KO, but not even severely wound, a fatigued Kid Ino, to being able to kill Kakashi, the strongest Jonin in Konoha, with a singular punch. This raw strength is demonstrated further in her fight with Sasori, where she's capable of destroying numerous puppets with single shots, including the Hiriko puppet, which is touted for its defense. The second fan book calls this feat great and attributes it to her remarkable growth in the time skip training that she had. Depending on how high you get Sasori, you could genuinely argue that, at least in terms of striking power, she's scaling into that Kage level of combatant. That said, possessing enough striking force to one-tap someone like Kakashi, who can take a wind-style pressure damage to the face and essentially no-sell it, with this jutsu being likened to a natural disaster, wiping out a gigantic section of the forest and not being survived by anyone up to that point, is massively impressive. This type of AP should honestly allow for her to one-tap basically everyone who's introduced up to that point, aside from maybe those with crazy regen. In terms of combat speed, Sakura should just be around Naruto, since she shows relativity to him in the second bell test, with Naruto and Sai being called the strongest of their peers by Danzo, so that should put her above basically everyone else in the Konoha 11, aside from probably Neji, who's the only Jonin at that point from the Konoha 11, so he's probably not included in that statement, at least in my opinion. But she should be firmly in that Chunin tier, with two super strong attributes in her strength and her medical ninjutsu that should both be firmly above Jonin level and probably into that Kage tier. That said, there isn't much more for this version of Sakura outside of her leaps in medical ninjutsu and knowledge, as well as her physical resilience, but I do think that the fact that her actual combat power has increased by a ton opens the door for her to effectively utilize her intellect, which is showcased in the fight with Sasori whenever she baits him into essentially sacrificing the third Kazekage puppet. So this version of Sakura, again, is really impressive in comparison to her Part 1 self, but not quite breaking into that higher tier of shinobi just yet. I actually think that the rank of Special Jonin would be a good one for her, as she seems to be generally Chunin level, but has immense talent and ability in medical ninjutsu as well as monstrous strength, both of which are clearly Jonin plus level. As you can see, throughout all of Part 1, Sakura is rightfully considered relatively useless. There are a few high moments for her pre-war in Shippuden, such as defeating Sasori. However, there's not a lot to go off of before we get to the war in Shippuden, so when you take the lack of feats in Shippuden plus all the anti-feats in Part 1, it's easy to understand why people would think that she's quite incapable as a combatant. But that said, she clearly enters a new tier of combatant during the final arc of Shippuden, the War Arc. Not only has she now gained the ability to utilize Katsuyu, adding to her versatility and broadening the scope of healing that she's capable of, she also completes her Byakugo seal, which then allows for her to really tap into the potential that she's had all along. If you're not aware, the Byakugo seal just requires the user to slowly funnel little bits of chakra into it over time, which means that they are inherently holding back. So when she stops doing that, and she says that the seal is complete, her strength visibly goes up by a lot. Not only that, she's also just simply communicated to be one of the strongest people in the series to that point. This is demonstrated through multiple statements, such as the one saying that she's shoulder to shoulder and equal with Naruto and Sasuke, but also, and more importantly, her feats, especially in the Kaguya fight. Most people overlook her feats against Kaguya for various reasons, with a lot of them using the idea that that this is a mental amp to debunk this, and that might be the case, although I do think that we have reason to believe that it's not. The reason for this is that literally right before the infamous punch, Sakura temporarily evades the Ten Tails arms protruding from unstable Kaguya. These arms were capable of outspeeding Naruto and Sasuke to the point of one of Naruto's clones having to push him out of the way, with Naruto calling them super fast. I went over this in my last video as to why, in terms of speed, shadow clones consistently scale to the user, so this is super impressive. This doesn't necessarily mean that Sakura is inherently over 6-path Sage Mode Naruto in speed, but rather, they're at least on the same tier. This brings me to my next point. Literally right after this, Kaguya absorbs the chakra from the infinite Tsukiyomi captives, which leads Black Zetsu to say that Kaguya has gotten exponentially faster and stronger. In other words, her speed and strength have been multiplied by themselves. An exponent means multiplying by the value. So if Kaguya is a 10 out of 10, she's now a 100, right? And right after this is when the infamous feat that everyone debates happened, Kaguya getting tagged and wounded by Sakura. This is usually the part where the content creators that you're listening to may try to disqualify this feat for a variety of reasons to make their videos more palatable, but it's where I'm going to defend the idea that it's even more impressive than you might think. You see, not only is this Kaguya, again, exponentially faster than the same Kaguya that was going relative to Naruto and Sasuke earlier, she also just does more damage to this Kaguya than 6-path Sage Mode Naruto does to an exponentially weaker version of Kaguya, breaking her horn and bruising the opposite side of her face, somehow, while Naruto barely leaves a scuff mark. Keep in mind, Kaguya is likely on guard when Sakura hits her, as indicated by the exclamation point above her head, while she's clearly off guard when Naruto does, as he hit her with the reverse harem jutsu. We know that being on guard or off guard can affect durability in Naruto, as this is just super consistent, so that just adds to how impressive this really is. This feat gets War Arc Sakura's punching strength a good deal, arguably exponentially above 6-path Sage Mode Naruto's, which is obviously ridiculous. A weaker version of Naruto was able to physically overpower Jubidara, so I don't think it's unfair to say that this version of Sakura should genuinely be able to blitz and vaporize Jubidara with a single punch. But wait, there's more. This is the part that most people don't talk about, and I think the reason is because it's uncomfortable for people to put this type of scaling on Sakura, but they forget that writers of series are usually not thinking of power scaling that often. They're more so thinking about the narrative, plus Kishimoto was rushed to finish the end of Naruto, so it feels weird to have a gigantic leap in power. But the scaling is the scaling, and Sakura verifiably react to movement speeds greater than 6-path Sage Mode Naruto and Rinnegan Sasuke yet again. You see, Naruto and Sasuke are closing in on Kaguya, inching closer and closer to her until they're roughly a few inches away. Then she flies up, covering roughly 80% of her body length in the time it takes for Naruto and Sasuke to move maybe a few inches. If we super lowball and assume that she's 5'6", she's actually enormous, this is a massive lowball again, and they move like 2 inches, they would have moved 2 inches in the same amount of time it took for her to cover like 60. That's a 30 times difference in speed. That's absolutely ridiculous. But this isn't the most important part. What matters here is that Sakura is able to time up an attack and tag her, despite her moving massively faster than Naruto and Sasuke's combat speed. To be more precise, Sakura was able to react to and tag someone moving at bare minimum 30 times faster than Naruto and Sasuke. That is ridiculous. So with this, based on the feats, I think it's fairly clear that Sakura is an absolute monster. Being able to react to, tag, and damage Kaguya makes Sakura verifiably an Otsutsuki tier of combatant in terms of physical stats, putting her above 99.99999% of people in the series. But the question then becomes, is this a temporary thing? Mental amp, plot-induced stupidity that's never intended to be consistent with the scaling? To find out, let's go over Sakura's feats in the movies and novels in the post-Shippuden era. But before that, if you're enjoying the video so far, or maybe have learned something, feel free to like and subscribe. You know, unless you hate women. After the conclusion of the war, we actually get some insanely good feats from Sakura. For example, in Naruto the Last, Sakura is able to keep up with and destroy Toneri's puppets, which are able to perform similarly against Base the Last Naruto, the same Naruto who's able to tag Toneri while Toneri is in his Tensegan chakra mode. These things would imply some sort of low-end relativity in terms of physical speed between Base the Last Naruto and Base the Last Sakura, which makes her at least, again, a low Otsutsuki level combatant in terms of physicals. This is also backed up by Naruto the Last data book, where in Sakura's profile it says that she had caught up to Naruto and Sasuke, corroborating this idea. But this is really only the tip of the iceberg. In Sakura Hiden, Sakura goes on to do some really interesting things that I've actually been super excited to talk about. Not only does she go toe-to-toe with Kido, while he's using the Tailed Beast drugs, which provide him a level 2 9-tailed beast cloak, she defeats him in one of the most big brain ways possible. To be fair, we don't really know exactly how strong Kido is, so we can't really get anything scaling-wise concrete from this. However, like I said, the way she goes about defeating Kido is what's really interesting here. Not only is she capable of instant regenning, getting stabbed through the torso and tossed by the tails of Kido's Nine-Tails cloak, and not being affected by the poisonous effects of the Nine-Tails chakra, giving her a new level of resilience that we haven't seen before, she also found a way to counter his regeneration that is super creative. You see, she was having a hard time getting through Kido's cloak to begin with, but even upon the cloak getting damaged, it had regenerative properties that made it harder for Sakura to do any substantial damage. So using a 5 million IQ strategy, Sakura countered the regen by forcing it to regen faster. She poured her healing chakra into the cells with every punch, forcing them to multiply, knowing that the cells would only regenerate so many times, thus forcing a maximum production of cells until they died and were easy to break through. Not gonna lie, this is actually really impressive IQ, and I think it's super underrated. But again, because we don't know how strong Kido really is in terms of power scaling, that doesn't give us anything concrete to work with, but I do think it's worth noting that this is something she's capable of, and that if she's facing somebody who has regen, assuming they can survive her punch in the first place, she has a way to counteract that. That said, this version of Sakura is clearly one of the top dogs in the verse, holding on to that semi-relativity with the other members of Team 7, at least in their non-kaiju forms and from a physical standpoint. If you're still questioning whether or not Sakura is actually like that, the stuff she does in the Boruto era just kinda seals the deal. Let's start with her battle with Shin. I'm sure you've all seen this already, but Sakura clearly goes toe-to-toe with Shin Uchiha, showing strong relativity to him in their close quarters clash. It is important to note, though, that he does have Sharingan precog, so it's likely that her physical scaling should at least be somewhat relative to him if she's able to keep up despite that. That said, this is important for a few reasons. This anime scene is actually an adaptation of the 7th Hokage and the Scarlet Spring side story manga. In this manga, we see Sasuke not only tell Naruto to be careful against Shin, implying that Shin is an actual threat to them in some capacity, Sasuke also shows physical relativity to Shin via Shin being able to react to and grab his sword mid-strike. This would indicate bare minimum low-end relativity from a physical sense between Shin and Naruto and Sasuke. So if Sakura is relative to Shin and Shin is relative to Naruto and Sasuke, this is yet another example of Sakura being on the same tier physically as her Team 7 counterparts. Even after this encounter, Sasuke is confident that Sakura can wrap things up against Shin herself, so it's incredibly consistent for her to be on that tier of combatant. Again, physically. I want to hammer that home because no, she's not on the same level as Naruto and Sasuke overall due to their higher forms, but she is consistently on their same tier in their lower forms physically. There isn't really anything that gives her higher combat scaling outside of these feats. She does have other feats, but it would just be redundant to list something that doesn't get her any higher. But her other abilities also do increase significantly, and there's one I'd really like to bring up that I just think is super cool. In Sasuke Retsuden, Sakura is capable of using her chakra to sense the entire structure of a building that she's in. This is credited to her chakra control, with the novel saying it was because she had such excellent chakra control that she could use this technique to search the structure of a building using chakra inorganically. So she literally has a chakra radar, like Daredevil's radar sense at this point, making her incredibly valuable for basically any mission that they could possibly go on. So not only is Sakura legitimately Otsutsuki level physically in terms of combat, she's also highly useful in a bunch of different aspects of being a shinobi, with her raw intellect and then the ability to do things like that. What this means is that, contrary to popular belief, Sakura is not only super useful, she's also absolutely, unequivocally underrated. Soon I'll be resuming my Strongest by Age series, so if you haven't seen part 1, make sure to go watch that, but also make sure that you click that beautiful red subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next one. But I definitely feel like this was necessary to cover before I go any further into the series, because a lot of people had issues with her placements in the first video. But if you made it this far, I just want to say thank you so much for making it all the way to the end, and until next time, have an awesome day.